Okay. Good morning on this cold Sunday morning. We're glad you're here. My name is Claudia Stravato, and I'm the worship associate this morning. And I'm part of the team that's working to bring this service to you wherever you may be. We're an inclusive congregation that welcomes you as you are, inclusive of all your identities, complexities, and situations. We welcome your whole self, even if it isn't fully assembled, because we recognize that we are all a work in progress and that we are all in this together. This service is being posted on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page so that folks can watch it later and feel free to share it with your friends and to have them look at it either now or later. I want to start our greeting session with this quote: "We are not above nature, we are all a part of nature." Now spend some time greeting one another and thinking about that. Okay, if you'll join me at this time in our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship. For these high purposes do we unite in worship. Please be seated. Okay, I'm going to light the chalice, and I want to give another important statement before we do. Sustainability of our earth is treating ourselves and our environment as if we are to live on this earth forever. this time, we're going to have a story for all ages, and Gene Buck is going to bring that to us.
Well, no, in case you haven't figured it out yet, our topic for the day is climate change. And instead of finding a nice, warm and fuzzy story about the effects of global warming, I found this. So it's a kid's book about climate change. Now, it turns out it is a bit of a story, but I thought it would be useful for all of us to see what approach people are taking with young people on this kind of very scary topic. So here we are. So, okay, this is our planet. Does it look small to you? That's because it is. Once you realize how gigantic outer space is, you can see that our planet's just a little blue dot spinning around in the universe. A famous scientist called Carl Sagan liked to point out something kind of awesome. Everything that's happened to any person ever has happened on this little blue dot we call home, Earth. Now forget about astronauts, but this means that every scientific discovery, every historical moment, every birthday, every rainy day, and every special memory you have ever had has happened right here on planet Earth. Isn't that incredible? Even though we know that we only have one home in our universe, we sometimes forget. We go to school, grown-ups go to work, we play with our friends, and our planet seems like something we don't have to worry about. Like there's no way that something could happen to it. But that's not true. The Earth needs us to take care of it just like we take care of our bodies. But recently, we haven't been doing that. Over the past 250 years or so, life on Earth has changed a lot. Humans started experimenting with travel. Suddenly, we weren't just walking, we were traveling by train, plane, and car to discover all the different parts of our planet. We built lots of homes, buildings, bridges, and cities. We discovered ways to meet the basic needs of a lot of people, like food, water, and shelter. And we didn't stop there. We made more stuff than a person could ever need or want. I'm sure that sounds awesome to you. I mean, how could any of this be bad? Well, after some time, something strange started to happen. Earth started to get sick. One scientist discovered how sick our planet was becoming. Leaders around the world set up laws to protect Earth. Unfortunately, those laws have not been enough to cure Earth's illness. Our planet has only gotten sicker and sicker. Earth's illness is called climate change. You probably know what you feel like when you're sick. Nothing is really working right. You can't breathe through your nose and can't sleep through the night. When the Earth is sick, it has more floods, fires, droughts, and food shortages. This means the people who live on Earth, that's all of us, may have to leave their homes, may have trouble breathing the air outside, and may not have access to food and water. You can think of climate change like the Earth getting a fever. Our planet is warming up, kind of like how your body warms up when it has a fever. And if you've ever had a fever, you know how even a little one can make a big difference in how you feel. But wait, why does the Earth have a fever? To understand that, it's important to understand more about carbon dioxide. Too much carbon dioxide in the air is the main reason the Earth is sick. Carbon dioxide's nickname is CO2. CO2 has always been in our air and isn't necessarily bad. In fact, you're breathing out CO2 right now. But like a lot of things in life, too much of something could be a bad thing. Over the past 250 years or so, we put a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. Living things on our planet aren't used to CO2 levels changing so quickly. The more carbon dioxide we release, the sicker Earth gets, and the harder it is for humans to thrive. Even though the Earth has only gotten sicker, our leaders have not handled the situation like an emergency, which isn't fair to those who didn't cause climate change, like kids. What's worse is that climate change hurts some people more than others. Confused? Let's explain why. Basically, the less money or resources someone has, the more they can be hurt by climate change. For example, if you're a young person, you live on an island or near the coast, you're a person with disabilities, you're a person of color, you don't have a home, you're pregnant, you're an older person, climate change probably affects you more. Think about it this way. If a wildfire leaves you without a place to live, you must have the money, support, and access to resources to find a new home. If you're a disabled person, it might be more difficult for you to leave your home if there is an emergency. In the United States, black families usually receive less money than white families after climate disasters and are more hurt by pollution. These are just a few examples of the way climate change is unfair. You know what else isn't fair? You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't cause climate change. After all, you were born not that long ago. Well, you know, that's all. But you should know that you deserve to live on our planet without having to worry about any of this. You have a right to clean water, clean air, and to live on a healthy planet. And a right is something you should never have to worry about. But even though you have a right to a healthy planet, not everyone is working to protect this right. In fact, some people are fighting against it, mostly because they make money from making the earth sicker. Now, after reading all of this, you're probably wondering, is our planet going to be sick forever? No, there are many ways we can take action to heal the earth, like using energy from water, wind, and sun. There are no limits on how much we can use of each of these. Did you know the sun provides more energy in 1 hour than the amount we need to power the earth for an entire year? We can also be protecting the rights of indigenous peoples. Did you know that indigenous peoples are less than 5% of the global population and protect 80% of life on earth? We can also be educating women. Did you know that educating women is one of the top 10 solutions to solving the climate crisis? Look it up, it's true. We can also be inventing new technologies that don't hurt the planet, growing our food in ways that help us take carbon dioxide out of the air. And we can also be protesting together and talking about climate change a lot to show our leaders how much we care about making Earth healthy, and inviting our friends to raise their voices with us. We need everyone's special skills to help fix this problem. Picture it, a healed Earth. What would that look like? Well, the possibilities are endless. It would look like trains that can travel as super fast speeds, which means people could drive and fly less. It would look like food that makes you healthier and stronger. It would look like clothes that turn back into soil after you outgrow them. Luckily, there are many people already working on the future, and we need you. No one should be born on a sick planet. That may be the case now, but it doesn't have to be. A better future is possible. Together, we can heal our little blue dot, our one home in the big universe.
We now have our tradition of sharing joys and concerns. At this time in our service, we recognize our members' and friends' joys and concerns in our community. Come forward, state your name, and put a lighted candle in the sand bowl, and I'll start. This past Wednesday, we had 8 people, or maybe 9, show up to spiff up the building. We labored. We had 6 women and 2 men, and you'll find the kitchen sparkles, and I hope it still smells of Clorox bleach. And I want to thank, everybody knows who they were. Some are here and some aren't. But even the footrests on the back of the chairs were cleaned. The windowsills, the entryway, and every salt and pepper shaker. It was really an interesting time, but I want to thank those members who came out and helped us do that. Now, if you would like to come and share your joy or concern, please come and give your name.
I'm Sharon Baker, and this is a Candle of Joy. Just recently, I told you I was going to be looking for people to be worship assistants, and so I targeted a few of them this past week with an email, and I got some responses. So you're going to be seeing some new faces, and you know what we always say here, time, talent, treasure. These people are going to give us their time and their talent, and so I'm very happy about that.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I've got a candle of joy. Yesterday, Saturday, there was a march downtown, Amarillo People's March, in coordination with the National People's March across the country. It was the only march for minimum of 4 or 5 hours drive anywhere else to get to one. And we had a pretty good turnout despite the weather. 15, 20 people came out, marched from around the county courthouse area down to City Hall and back about women's reproductive rights, LGBTQ plus rights, immigrants' rights. As we know, that's going to likely be under attack pretty soon. So, yeah, I'm just glad that there were quite a few people who came out for that. If anyone here was there or heard about it, thank you. And, yeah, other than that, only other thing I'll say is Ken is out of town, so existential exclamations at the end is on hold until February.
It's just my outfit.
Oh, just lift it, just turn it down, yeah.
There we go. Good morning. I am Sonia, and I know many of you, but a lot of you I haven't gotten acquainted with as yet. I want to riff on one paragraph that Jean read about fires or disasters. As many of you know, I was a victim of the Hermit's Peak Cap Canyon fire in April of 22, and I lost almost everything. And fortunately, I was, as was mentioned in that paragraph, I had resources and money and abilities that I have been able to recover to a certain extent. But there were many that did not. So I want to say that I am grateful for that. And then I want to empathize with those in California that are going through the same trauma. It's kind of like PTSD for me, because the things that I see people saying on the television and their comments when they're interviewed are the same as the comments that we were making 2.5 years ago. It's not so much the loss of your belongings, you know, your material things that you can replace if you have the resources. It's the loss of things that are irreplaceable, so you have to hold those in your mind and in your heart. And I have several things that were like that. The insurance made me itemize everything, and that was excruciating because you're trying to forget it, but you got to put down every little item that you can remember, and then you have to tell them when you got it and how much you paid for it. 10 pair of underwear. Approximately, I don't know, over time, various prices. So anyway, it was not any fun at all to do that. And so the current fire I was watching Sunday morning, and they showed pictures of houses and buildings that were erected or designed by various architects and that sort of thing. Most of them were pretty grandiose. And so I empathize with what all's going on in all of those people's lives, but not all of the people in Altadena and the areas that were so devastated have that kind of resources to recover. So my hope and support goes out to them. And most of all, since I was more or less pushed to come back to Amarillo, lived here 30 years and was a member of this congregation. But this is one of the things that is, I can't express how happy and I am that this community is still here and still welcoming and supporting. Thank you.
And one final candle for all the joys and concerns deeply felt but not shared here today. We now have music.
Low below me, I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep. companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on. Greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Blue boat
At this time, we're going to have a meditation and period of silence. And I'd like to share a short reading from Lady Bird Johnson. Many of you are old enough to remember who she is, but some of the younger ones may not. The environment is where we all meet, where all have a mutual interest. It is the one thing that all of us share. We have another reading from Jean Buck. And if you'll come at this time.
I found the following prayer on the UUA website. It's been there for quite a while, although it could have been written this week. And I dedicate this to Sonia. It's called As Fires Loom. Spirit of life and love, we gather today under smoky skies, aching from the onslaught of the daily news, our spirits weary and sore, our nerves jangling with every loss of power, every alert on our phones. Our thoughts this morning are with the firefighters and all those whose bodies continue to be on the line. Our hearts with every person who has lost a home or a place of work or a special piece of wilderness. Our minds with the unfolding effects of climate change and the path ahead of us. As sirens sound in the distance, we pause here to center ourselves once again, to transform our tension into tranquil readiness, our fears into loving purpose. May we find in this time a moment of calm amidst the wind-churned ashes. May we find in this sanctuary the space to let down our masks and breathe together. May we find in this community reminders that we are enough and are not alone. I invite you to breathe in the quiet with me for a moment, to take in the serenity of this being together, and breathe out more love into this room. Come, let us sit in silence and settle into the peace of this time together.
At this time, I want to introduce our speaker today. I've known him for a long, long time, and there were things about him I didn't know until he gave me a piece to introduce him with. Reverend Abraham, I didn't know he was a reverend. I just thought he was a radical troublemaker. Is an ordained minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. After receiving his education at Texas Christian University and Yale Divinity School, Allen served churches in Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico before retiring and moving to Amarillo in 2003 with his wife Nancy. Beginning in 2004, he ran for and was elected to the Texas Silver-Haired Legislature, and that's where I knew him from, and served 8 terms as a legislative advocate to the Texas legislature on issues affecting the lives of senior citizens. He and other leaders in the community brought the senior homestead tax freeze to Amarillo and surrounding communities. In addition to his legislative work, he was a member and served on the board of the Amarillo League of Women Voters, and that's where I knew him best. And he participated in the Amarillo Senior Ambassadors Coalition, which is a service organization of professionals serving seniors, and a member of the Texas Kin Care Task Force, a statewide task force on behalf of grandparents raising grandchildren. Alan and sometimes Nancy had been participating in the fellowship since about the time David Green was minister here. Please welcome Alan to our pulpit.
Thank you. I've got to set this up for me. Claudia, there's the notebook. I came up here Friday and figured out how to do all this, so it'll just take a minute. I want you to meet Sonic. Well, I didn't practice that. Okay. Just a second here. Yes, Sonic the Hedgehog. This is for my eyes, my focus, so I can see. It's irony that on a very cold, wintry Sunday, we're talking about global warming. Actually, Claudia is the reason for me being here to do this. From a comment she made back in the summer about I can't seem to get anyone to come talk to us about climate warming, and that happens to be one of my reading hobbies. And so I took that challenge on starting sometime in August, preparing this sermon. And then the date given me was January 19th, and I said, oh, criminy, that's right in the middle of winter. I don't know how that's going to go over, but here we are. And this service has just been enriched with all kinds of thought-provoking things about our environment and our very precious little blue boat. Now, I'm intrigued how climate influences the way we think about weather. For example, 50 years from now, will we be talking about major weather events as acts of God or acts of man? And how will insurance companies react? Already exempt from certain acts of God, the list could be growing. Coastal flooding, unsurvivable surges, monster hurricanes, multiple tornadoes, longer droughts, regular fire seasons. Are heat waves next? Winter storms? High winds? What about ocean current disruption? My sermon title is taken from a Greek satirist by the name of Archelaus with his astonishing assertion: the fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows one big thing. And ecologists have speculated and interpreted that as belonging to one of nature's laws, which briefly stated would be this: we can never merely do one thing. A law of nature. How so? The poet Francis Thompson, whose life was sandwiched between Darwin's Origin of Species and Rachel Carson's 1962 Silent Spring, answers poetically this way: all things by immortal power, near or far, hiddenly to each other are linked. Thou canst not stir a flower without troubling a star. Alfred North Whitehead spoke plainly about this condition when he wrote, "The essence of dramatic tragedy is not unhappiness. It resides in the solemnity of the remorseless working of things." Now, you might already know hedgehogs have a first name. Sonic. If you don't know that, you haven't been to the Buc-ee's opening yet. Their mascot. But I didn't know he had a first name until I one day was driving back from McKinney this summer, and Nancy and I stopped at a gas station, fill up with gas. It was just a little town. It was just a two-pump place, so there was not a big hubbub around. And while I'm filling up, this lady walks over and says, "Here, I want you to have this hedgehog." I thought, what is going on here? But it seems that there's a fad afoot where toy critters are placed on certain model cars, usually anonymously, as friendly gestures of comradeship. And so you will see on Jeeps, on the dashboard, you'll see a bunch of little funny animals on some of these people's cars. My daughter happens to be one of those that's involved in that sort of fad. So I've learned about Sonic. What you might not know is hedgehogs and Charles Darwin share something in common. You might not know that. Here's an illustration from Darwin on the remorseless working of things. Bumblebees in England pollinate red clover. Clover disappears without the bees, and the number of humblebees in any district, according to beekeepers, depends in great measure upon the number of field mice, which destroy their combs and nests. Now, the number of mice is largely dependent, as anyone knows, on the number of cats. Hence, and now I'm quoting Darwin, it is quite credible that the presence of a feline animal in large numbers in a district might determine, through the intervention first of mice and then of bees, the frequency of certain flowers in that district. Let's embroider on that chain reaction a moment. We could say cats are kept by old maids. Or more recently, as we've learned, childless cat ladies. And red clover, which requires bees as pollinators, is used to make hay that nourishes the horses of the cavalry on which the defense of the British Empire depends. Logically, then, we can conclude that the perpetuation of the British Empire depends on a bountiful supply of childless cat ladies. Cannot stir a flower without troubling a star. The Aswan Dam on the River Nile is more down to earth, pardon my pun, illustration of never doing merely one thing, and crystal clear to our hedgehog. A human intervention created to harness the Nile for electricity was intended to do one thing, but wound up depriving the Nile basin of its annual fertilization of flooding and flushing that had served it well for 5,000 years, which caused more salt to accumulate in the soil, which diminished the sardine catch in the eastern Mediterranean, which habituated a growing snail population, upon which a certain disease organism fed, which increased Egypt's chronically ill population in need of medical treatment, and so on. You get the point. Human interventions into the natural order of things can have cascading consequences not easily reversed. And that's not the scariest part. Think about the air we're breathing right now in this room. You know that air is confined to a very thin layer of the Earth's atmosphere. It's no higher in elevation than a third of the way up Mount Everest. The air we're breathing right now, it's part of the Earth's troposphere, which is about 7 miles bottom to top. Its bottom third contains half of all the gases in the atmosphere and is the only part of our atmosphere that is breathable. My friends, that's scary. This magnificent spaceship called Earth holds all its passengers in a fragile web of interconnectedness, and climate is one of those networks. Clearly, there is a difference between weather and climate. Tom Flannery, in his book, The Weathermaker, spells out the distinction this way. He writes, weather is what we experience every day. Climate is the sum of all weathers over a certain period for a region or for the planet as a whole. And he goes on to say, and all, of course, are generated in the atmosphere. So what controls climate? Well, there's lots of things, some of which we humans do not influence. elliptical and eccentric orbits around the sun, for instance, the tilt of the Earth on its axis, which determines where the most radiation or heat falls. The Earth's wobble on its axis, which shifts between pointing to the North Star and to Vega, the other North Star. Now, these movements affecting climate follow cycles of thousands of years. Something else for the last 10,000 years, the Earth's thermostat has been set at approximately 57 degrees Fahrenheit, making us the Goldilocks planet to our nearest neighbors. That is until the Industrial Revolution. Also, we've been taking the Earth's temperature for 400,000 years with the help of ice cores and petrified tree rings. There's more. Things like continental drift, carrying more land surface near the poles, sunspots, cosmic collisions, and a climate-driving force known as greenhouse gas. We don't have much time to get into the science of carbon cycles, except to say that things like oceans, soil, some rocks, living things, including fauna, especially young forests, trap heat and act as carbon sinks to sequester CO2. Then when we burn fossil fuels derived from living things dead and buried, greenhouse gases are released. And this release into the atmosphere of carbon molecules holds some of the radiation from returning back to space. Wait a minute. So how do we know that? How do we know that? Charles Keeling was not the first scientist to see the connection between carbon and temperature rise, but he was the first to count carbon particles in the atmosphere with heat rise. Particles are recorded as parts per million, or ppms. He was on top of a Hawaiian volcano when he took his first reading at 313 ppm. That was in 1958. 57 years later, the ppm had risen 25% to 378. Atmospheric temperatures followed that same trajectory. His records also showed small variations in temperature that were annual and predictable, rising in April and May, then declining steadily until October, at which point it begins to rise again. Picture a saw blade of temperature change in an upward motion or direction. Scientists describe this fluctuation as planet breathing. Here's their explanation. There is far greater land mass and thus much more vegetation in the northern hemisphere than the southern. So as the trees above the equator grow their leaves in spring and summer, they draw carbon out of the atmosphere, the CO2 level increasing again with the return of fall and winter. The Keeling curve had, in fact, captured the Earth's breathing. Now, this curve has had many iterations, all of which resemble a hockey stick on a graft. For example, in 1998, two climatologists and a tree ring expert extended Keeling's graph of ppm accumulation back 500 years for a reconstruction of hemispheric warming. Now, if you will, picture on the graph, in your minds, a graph with downward temperature trend from the 1400s to 1900 as forming a hockey stick shaft, followed steady increase in temperature corresponding to a hockey stick blade. Voila. You now have in your mind the hockey stick image of global warming. When the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change featured the hockey stick as evidence of global warming in its third assessment report in 2001, the enhanced Keeling curve went from notoriety to controversy. And let's be very clear where the controversy lies. The Earth's climate system stabilized like the shaft of a hockey stick coming out of the last glacial period, and before our greenhouse gases disturbed it from equilibrium beginning in 1900. Up the blade. Translation. Hockey stick graph translation. Current climate change is anthropomorphic. It is man-made. The petroleum industries are especially aggrieved by this hockey stick, given that the vast amount of sunlight needed to grow 100 tons of plant matter, and given the prodigious rate at which we are burning fossil fuels, it should come as no surprise that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution age, we humans are requiring several centuries worth of buried sunlight to keep our economy growing. The figure for the year 1997, around 422 years of fossil sunlight, is typical. Now this is like ripples in a pond spreading out from a dropped pebble. There comes a time when human ppms will overwhelm nature's capacity to manage a sustainable climate. More recent computer guesses from the environmental sciences are not all that far apart, giving climate deniers, but before the modern computer programs, earlier predictions were off the mark and not reliable, giving climate deniers the opening they needed to draw attention to disagreement among scientists and an unsettled science, a hoax, as some would call it. Truth is, nowhere can predicting the future be precise. We can't know the future, but believe you me, we know the science. There is no disputing in the scientific community about the correlation of greenhouse gas and heat absorption in the atmosphere. And that tells me we're wasting our time with denials and should begin our due diligence adding up the cost of doing nothing. For example, since 1970s, insurance losses due to climate warming have risen an annual rate of 10%. Blaming God instead of man for weather is a worn-out excuse for our environmental deficit spending. And what about our courts? Shouldn't our courts become more proactive in enforcing environmental regulations and assigning damages on pollution with or without public consensus on climate? And so we have questions. Isn't more sunlight needed on lobbying Congress so that the public can know whose spending is impacting environmental protections? I mean, we've been through this before with ozone depleters and the tobacco lobbyists, for crying out loud. And when will the federal government start regularly tracking and reporting the nation's CO2 emissions, like with economic indices, so we know how much headway we're making on our carbon cutting targets? And when will our policymakers give us a carbon tax? That means everyone, producers and consumers, everywhere in the economy, sharing the burden of our carbon footprint. Promoting energy efficiency this way creates a dedicated revenue stream for green infrastructure and technology investment. Can corporations be held accountable when their location or their production is damaging a regional climate, causing drought to deepen, or destroying a country's ecosystem, causing famine and deadly conflict? Litigation on climate impacts has already begun. The Inuits of the Arctic are currently in a court of law with claims for damages to their culture and to the cost for whole towns being relocated. Add rising seas, changing storm tracks, rainfall and heat waves, and we begin to see the scope of legal, policy, and insurance contingencies in a world that no longer references climate disasters as acts of God. There's one more burden for us to consider from knowing what the hedgehog knows, that we can never do merely one thing. This burden, masterfully spelled out by mathematician James Lovelock when he writes, "If man encroached upon the planet's functional power to such an extent that he disabled her, he would wake up one day to find that he had the permanent, lifelong job of planetary maintenance engineer. Then at last we should be riding that strange contraption, the spaceship Earth, and whatever tamed and domesticated biosphere remained would indeed be our life support system." End of quote. Planetary maintenance engineers. Is that a bridge too far when we're talking about climate change? Probably so, but not out of range from what the prophet Jeremiah warned his generation about the children's teeth being set on edge while their parents kept on eating sour grapes. Now, you may go to your knees if you want and pray for the victims of Los Angeles fire. But the next flood and the next hurricane, the next drought, the next fire season, the next heat wave or winter storm, the next time it snows in northwest Montana in August, I suggest we get off our knees and begin agitating our state and congressional delegations. Thank you. Let's see, I can just move this. Claudia, you'll have to find your stuff again.
Well, that was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
That Alan's talk today is a direct association with our principles. It says spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. At this time, we're going to have our giving and receiving. May we give this offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation, and may we give in love and hope. Okay, we have been having a path to membership in our fellowship in recent weeks. We've done it on the 12th and again today, and we'll do it again on the 26th if you're interested in joining us, a little band of angels. The class will give you a chance to learn about the history of Unitarian Universalism, which is extremely interesting, and of our fellowship, along with the principles and values that you yours hold dear. It'll also give you a chance to ask questions and get a better understanding of how our fellowship operates. If you're interested, Joan, would you stand up so they'll know who our membership chair is, if you're interested in joining our fellowship. The events that we sponsor here are interesting. We have the Free Thought Society that meets the second and fourth Sunday at 2. Our adult religious education, we have 2 classes, one at every Sunday at 10 in the classroom, and then the Knowledge Seekers every Sunday at 10 a.m. here in Chandler Hall. We have a book club that meets the 4th Tuesday of each month. We have an AA recovery group that's a secular group that meets every Saturday at 6 p.m. We have a group that's supposed to meet today but will not be meeting because their leader is not here, and that's Existential Exclamations. And then we have the Nothing Much Buddhist group that meets on Zoom on Monday nights at 7:30. Our upcoming services, John, thank you for straightening this out. Next Sunday, we're going to have Reverend Carol Eagleheart from New Mexico, who will be speaking on Now What. February 2nd, Reverend Chuck Fisher, we never know what he's going to talk about, but it's always fascinating. And then on the 9th, Ryan Brown, who's an attorney here in Amarillo, will be speaking about the 10 Commandments at City Hall. And at this time, I'm going to extinguish the chalice, which I'm going to read another sustainability quote. And it is, sustainability is no longer about doing less harm. It's about doing more good. Okay, if you'll please stand and join us in the closing song. Come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots hold me close, wings set me free, Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. May the fellowship of this hour touch and move our lives until we come again together. We're adjourned.